Is this going on live, or was
Yes.
just
Yes.
We are live.
So, cheerio, chap.
We are live.
We are live. Shalom Aleichem. This is Apologia versus Atheism. This is the third one. We have
You get Gus in here.
Apologia.
I don't think you'll
Apologia.
fit.
Just say the English. No one's going to bother you.
Fine. The Apologetics versus Atheism. So, with us today, we have two theist guests. The Holy Spackle, who usually does interviews.
What's up?
And then we have Maximus Confessus,
Hello.
who makes his own apologetic material online. So we're
Just
gonna
do videos so far.
do videos of it. So what we're doing right now is we're just gonna invite. We're allowing atheists mainly to come in here, encourage them to ask all kinds of questions they have concerning theology, Christianity, or any concerns or questions they have in general. So with us now is Bunto Skiffler.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. And then we have probably one of my favorites. We have Annabelle. Welcome.
Annabelle's running the hang house.
I'm in the bathroom at the moment.
No.
I'm
But-
not doing anything. I'm just in the bathroom. I'm going to leave the bathroom in a minute. Just telling you that's what it sounds like it does. That's all.
How do we
Gotcha.
know that's true? I had this. Sorry, not the.
We don't
apologetic,
really
I
need
was
to
starting.
verify that. We can take your word on it.
Yeah. We'll have faith with it.
Bathroom apologetics.
Not the first time I've heard that one.
Is that what Dragnot does?
Hmm.
Probably referring to the time he was peeing while speaking to us.
All right. So let's get down to
He
the
never
topic.
did that, did he?
He has done that.
Yes.
Well, I once asked him a direct question, and he turned on the phone and just to answer us, and we could hear the pee stream going on in the background.
Such a heathen.
All right. All right. So let's, Annabelle, you got a question? I want to be kind and generous and allow women to go first. So would
Yeah,
you like
well,
to
we're
ask?
back to doing that here.
The
Equality.
weaker sex.
So no, don't start. I'll let the older man go first. You know, age before beauty.
Oh, okay. Alrighty, let me see. Who shall I dig in? Okay, let's go with the host of the show. Okay, Christian Anarchist. You've been a Christian for how long?
Let's see. I was converted or confessed my faith whenever I was 19 years old. 21 now, so I'd say about 2 years.
For about 2 years, right? And you've come across this creature called an atheist? Has no belief in God?
I wouldn't call him a creature. I would
Just
just
a yes or
consider
no,
him a-
yes or no question.
Yeah.
Yes or no.
Yeah, I came across.
All
him.
right, these people don't believe in God, right? Just,
Mhm.
you know, in general, why do you think that is so?
Well, that has all kinds of reasons, depending on,
Well, what's your favorite?
Well, my favorite is the most common is that they don't see any reason or evidence to believe that such a deity or being known as God exists.
They don't have any evidence sufficient enough for them to believe in God.
Right.
Okay.
Pretty
Isn't
much
that true? Isn't that true?
Are you asking me that?
Yeah.
Well, I think personally that there is evidence for it. It's just mainly a difference on philosophy.
Where's the location of God in this universe?
I don't think that he's in this particular universe. He is
Okay.
that we are in.
So God is essentially unreal.
God might be immaterial.
Okay, where is this location?
Also, let's just
That's
remember.
handy.
Also, let's remember one thing. Because one is outside the universe does not mean one is outside of reality. The universe just represents. No, so the
Okay,
universe.
what things outside of our universe exist in reality? What's the simile?
If you were a Christian, you would hold to angelic beings,
If I was
and
a
also God.
scientist, materialist, what
I'm an angelic being.
If you were a Platonist, you would hold that Platonic objects exist outside of space and time as well.
I'm a scientist materialist. What are these things that exist outside the universe that are real?
Well, for you, it could also be multiverses. So other
The
universes.
multiverse is a concept. So God is essentially a concept like the multiverse?
Well, no, if the multiverse exists, it would just be more universes out there.
What proof do we have of the multiverse?
I don't know, read Lawrence Krauss.
Usually string theory and physics. But that's a possibility. If you
So
hold
do we
to
have as
multiverse
much
theory.
evidence for God as we do the multiverse?
All right, now it gets on to what evidence does one have for God. My evidence would be if you take a theistic worldview, such as my own, and compare it to a naturalistic worldview, then I believe the theistic worldview has a much wider array
Okay,
of
your
explanatory
worldview is
power.
entirely invalid for the
Can
sake
I
of
just
this
say something? Can I
conversation.
just say
Go ahead.
something?
Yeah,
You can
go ahead.
believe that. That's your personal opinion, but you've got no evidence to back up your personal opinion.
Okay, it's kind of like this. We throughout human history, we can observe the effects of gravity. So if this harmonica is dropped, it falls to the ground. But in the nature of gravity, that requires an exploration of different models. So if you go back to the beginning with Sir Isaac Newton, he explained the effects of gravity as an immaterial force throughout the world, whereas later on what happened was we kind of relegated gravity as being a property of space-time. So what we do is we look to the effect and see which cause better explains the effect we're seeing. So that is analogous to how I would state that we
the
could
problem you've
show
got
God
with that,
exists.
the
Does the
problem you've got
universe?
with that though, Max, is you've got about 3,000 gods. Which one is it that's causing the stuff that you claim it is?
This gets to our definition of God. So I don't define God as being like Thor or Odin or Zeus. I think that these
I
are
said to the Maximus, it's not so much what you think, it's what science thinks. See, that's the difference.
well.
Okay,
Well,
your
so
point of view is entirely invalid to the scientist materialists because there's not any sufficient evidence
what?
or proof for
Well,
your. Okay, you say gravity, right? We can see its
right.
behavior upon, its effect.
Mhm.
Can we do the same with the God concept? Can we see its effect upon our reality?
So
Can the scientist measure it the same way it can gravity?
okay, so what I would suggest is we look at at nature itself, and we see, does it make more sense to say that this is an effect of a creator being, or does it make more sense to say it stands alone? And
It makes
that's
more sense to say it stands alone because there's no evidence of a creator being.
okay. And the second thing is and I would state the opposite. I'd say there is more.
Hang on a sec. We're not making a claim. You are. Yet you've got
Okay,
no
then.
evidence. We're asking for evidence, and you're saying, well, this is what I think it is, and this is what I think creates things on Earth. You've got nothing to back it up.
Well, for one to say that this is knowledge, one has to first say it is, of course, a belief, because knowledge is fairly
That's not true.
well,
I'm
yeah,
not going
knowledge
to go down the philosophy route with you. I'm going to stick to facts. You have no evidence whatsoever to back up your claims that your creator God is the God that's created this planet and all the life on it.
Hang on.
So could okay.
I got a
so
question.
could
I got a question for
right,
you,
wait.
Max.
Could I just respond here?
All right, sure.
So, all right, but the main point I'm saying is, in order for one to first establish something is the case, to have knowledge of it, one has to at least establish that they hold to it in terms of belief, at the very least. One can't say
They don't have
they
to
know
say
the
belief.
periodic.
They can say they have an idea.
Well, now we're just getting into semantics.
No, it's not semantics. Belief is a religious concept. You realize
it's
that.
not.
It's a
No, it's-
philosophical
No, it's
theological
not.
concept.
To say
I
something-
believe in black matter. No, I have
No,
evidence
to say someone believes in something is to say they hold that it is the case.
All right.
You could say that for philosophical. Go ahead, Christian, if you want to dive in
Yes.
there.
All right. So, Max, this would be the thing that, to me, I'm more into philosophy than I am into natural sciences, though I used to actually be very much into science, especially when college we were starting to get around into biology. But lately I've gotten into philosophy, and I don't know, to me, do you think when it comes to the concept of a creator or deity, you have people that are in a intelligent design movement and all that kind of stuff that would point out to a form of creator God that can be detected in science.
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that
Sorry, can I just stop you a minute there, Christian? Did you actually make the claim that there is science backs up a creator God?
No, I was just
he's
saying
asking me a question.
Okay, Max,
No,
I'm talking to Christian.
I was just saying
sorry,
that.
I just wanted to understand because I thought that was the claim that you made. Sorry, carry on.
I was just describing what the intelligent design movement tries to advocate.
Okay, no, that's fine.
But yeah, but Maximus, do you think that for the claims of what we believe, do you think that most of it that are evidence is in the realms of sciences, natural sciences, or is it in the realms of philosophy? What would your
Well, I'd actually state that the natural sciences are engaged in something a little than something very different from what philosophy is engaged in. Science is more about, as in terms of my own viewpoint, science is more about in creating empirically adequate models to take into account our observations and create a model as a way of structuring the effects that we see in nature itself. This is why they're tentative. They can account for future ideas. This is why new models take place until they lose their predictive power, so on and so forth. Science isn't about the model being, at least as I see it, true or false. It's about finding the model which is most empirically adequate. That's what it's tending towards. So I would go with empirical constructivism.
Okay. Anyone want to comment on that?
Yeah.
Well, what's it? Can someone please explain what do you mean by empirical constructivism? What does that mean?
All right. So in the philosophy of
postmodernist invention.
no, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
Well, let's.
That's why I need you to explain it to me because it's not something that
Yeah.
you know.
So postmodern doesn't. So postmodernism is very different, but so in philosophy of sciences, there's two camps. The realist camp says that we are in some way committed to what science tells us about the world itself in some way, shape, or form, and the anti-realists beg to differ. They see unobservables such as electrons, molecules, things you can't really see with the bare eye. All those things are, well, anti-real. Science doesn't make any claim to.
Oh my.
Which,
No, wait. Science doesn't make any claim to what about molecules?
well, they don't. Well, scientific models don't stand or fall whether or not they exist.
What?
Yeah. So nobody has ever actually observed a quantum particle. We don't have super advanced microscopes to get down to that level. And even if we did, we're just seeing
molecule though. That's not the same thing, is it?
No, they're not.
No.
But
we've observed molecules.
But anyway, the main point is science is concerned with constructing empirically adequate models of the universe. That means we observe phenomenon that goes on, and to explain the phenomenon, we create models, and these models help guide us in terms in terms of explaining it. That's
you're talking about right now. You're talking about cosmology, aren't you?
Well, it would apply to different sciences everywhere. From biology,
for example,
cosmology,
evolution.
physics.
We've got plenty of evidence for evolution.
Yeah, I think evolution is I think evolutionary theory is the best model of science we have thus far, and because of that, it's the most empirically adequate model we have constructed.
I wish we could get a scientist in here, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well,
actually, all three are theistic evolutionists, actually. So
yeah.
We're in
but you're not scientists.
No, we're not.
We'll get scientist Sam in here at some point.
Scientist Sam would be perfect for this. Gary Edwards isn't too bad because he covers a lot of philosophy of science. Ozymandias Ramses II wouldn't be bad either.
No, they're not scientists. They're philosophers. Scientist Sam is a scientist.
Yes, he is. Mm-hmm. But philosophy of science is something Scientist Sam has engaged with himself.
Oh God! You know what? I'm not sure I can stay. If you're going to do this, Max, take over the hangout like this. I'm not. I can't.
Well, I was just actually about to take over and try to.
I appreciate that this is your favourite subject and you're very passionate about it, but honestly,
all right.
Well, if you want, Annabelle, I was going to actually ask you what if you wanted to ask me, Deidre, or Max a question, so you can change the subject.
I don't know, but maybe Bunto wants to pick up on it. I don't want to feel like I can't be doing with all the philosophy crap. It's just can't do it.
Well, if I could ask you, all right. Go right
Right,
ahead.
it's just words that you're using. You've got no evidence, no backup, nothing, and I hear it all the time, and it just bores the pants off me. And it doesn't, with the greatest respect, Max, and we've had this conversation privately loads of times, it doesn't provide me with anything to persuade me what, in any way, shape, or form, that your God, your particular deity that you choose to believe in, exists.
All right, but we were just talking about the nature of science, though, and the nature of science isn't.
And you tried to bring philosophy, and you tried to bring philosophy into it.
The nature of science is a philosophical discussion. We don't do scientific experiments.
Okay, Maxi boy.
Okay, I'll chill.
Take the chill pill, calm it down. There we go. All right, so Bunto, do you have another question?
Well, let me just dovetail that one. You can get out of it after that. Okay, Max gave a very intricate, I'm not going to say obtuse, there's better, milder words, explanation of what he believes science is. But really what science, the method, is to ascertain what is real in our reality, in our universe. It's not so much where you're going to, in the Bible they say, strain the gnat for swallowing the camel, right? They're going to strain the gnat but swallow the camel. You guys know what I'm saying, the theist? That Bible verse, right? You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Or did everybody get muted?
Repeat the verse again.
The one where it says where they strain the gnat but swallow the camel, right?
Matthew 23, verse 24.
Very good. Okay, that's what I wanted to hear, though. Besides asking for an amen. What I'm trying to say is that it's very simple. Science wants to ascertain what is real in our reality. Okay, not so much the postmodernist construction that Max gave. Okay, when one asks the believer, where is the location of this thing that you believe in, it's incumbent upon the person that made the assertion to provide that evidence. It's, just to tell our listeners, when you look for that, none is offered. So it makes you believe that, they have nothing but their belief, their preference in believing that this thing exists. That's, if the difference between an atheist and the theist is simply that. The assertion is made and there's no evidence given. You can choose which side you want to be on. You can be on the one that needs no evidence, or you can be on the one that evidence is crucial.
All right. So is the question you're asking what kind of evidence you... So are you just asking for evidence for God's existence?
I asked Christian Anarchist what he believes is the foremost problem that atheists have with the believer. And he says it's because of lack of evidence. And I said, isn't that true?
Was that Max? I'm now confused now.
I asked you.
Okay. But I mentioned earlier that yeah, that's one of the problems. Then, but if that's true, I think more personally, it's in the sense of philosophy, because people are going to have their own ideas of how they perceive things.
That may be true, but the thing is, we're talking in the realm of the scientist materialist. Where is the location of this thing you claim exists?
Like, you're asking for a physical realm, like where in a location.
That'd be a start.
Right.
If it's a force or behavior, where's the scientists that have measured it?
Well, considering that God would be immaterial, said things would be a category error. It would be like
this is not philosophy, Max.
No, a category.
This is simple science. Where is the evidence for the thing you assert is real?
What is the width of a square? What is the width, height, and length of a square?
Okay, if that is so, square is essentially a concept, right? So you're saying God is like a square?
No, I'm asking
square concept.
No, so I'm
many squares and many widths. What we're asking scientifically. No. Listen to me. Let me talk. You have talked. Let me talk. I'm asking you simply, as a scientist materialist, where is the location of this thing that you assert is real in our reality?
It doesn't. Well, to say it has location would be to predicate. All three of those dimensions to God, which
it's immaterial.
Being a materialist would not have. It's a category error. it would be like asking, and this is where the analogy comes in. What is the height? What is the height within length of a square?
Okay, listen. We don't need analogy. We need evidence. Okay.
An analogy is to help illustrate why your question is malformed.
Okay. Can you give him what is God analogous to in our reality, like gravity, electromagnetism, atomic energy? See, we can measure we can at least see evidence of those forces.
All right. God would be significantly other, and thus not analogous, and thus he would be not really analogous to anything we see, touch, or can empirically apprehend.
I rest my case. Okay.
Exactly.
How does that entail that
honestly,
God is false?
Max, have a bit more. Max, have a bit more integrity and admit that you don't have any physical or empirical evidence for your God, and that you have faith. That's what you believe in. That's what gives you your belief.
But empirical evidence isn't the only form of evidence.
Well, it is in the real world.
Okay, then where's the empirical evidence that there is only empirical evidence?
Oh boy.
Okay, hold on a second. I just gotta.
I mean, you can't have a conversation if you're just going to do this. It's just ridiculous.
What am I doing? I'm asking you. Where's the empirical evidence
that
only empirical evidence exists?
We're talking to two materialists. We're talking to two materialists.
Every question you are asked, you turn into another question.
Yeah, well, I'm showing you how your standard.
No, we could possibly just answer the question honestly, then we would get a little further, wouldn't we?
Well, if your question is malformed, then there's no
patronising, Max. I've asked a very.
The question has been malformed for how many thousands of years, Max? Where is the evidence for this thing that you assert exists within our reality?
Well, nobody took atheism seriously for thousands of years.
Yeah, come on.
I've never seen something called the scientific method.
Oh, that's a ridiculous. I'm sorry, the atheists were murdered and slaughtered if they even so much as suggested.
All right, hold on a second.
Guys, take control.
Yeah.
I know it's not very funny, but that's a ridiculous comment. If he's going to make ridiculous comments like that, then I can make ridiculous comments about his God.
I know.
I want to try to move on. We're gonna end that topic there.
Well, you invited Max. You deal with it.
Max,
and so we're gonna go to Wolf, who's just come in. But first, before we do that, are you sure you don't have any questions on you at the moment, Annabelle?
Sorry, did you ask me a question?
Yeah, did you have any questions that you...
the questions don't have to be the existence of God. And they can
I understand. I've got a question. It's all right. I have one.
All right, go ahead.
How do you I can't think of the word. Just remember it's 2 o'clock in the morning here. How do you can't think of the word, but you've got so many different beliefs in the world. You've got Hinduism, Jainism, Shintoism.
Scientology?
Pardon?
Scientology.
Yeah, you've got tons of different beliefs. Different gods, different beliefs. And these beliefs to these people are just as valid and just as real to them as they are to you. How do you, what's the word, Bunto? How do you come to terms with that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
How do you mitigate your...
For me, that was one of the biggest reasons it confirmed my atheism even more once I started traveling and meeting people and seeing people and their beliefs and how different they were to the West.
Right.
There's a huge world out there with billions of people that really have no belief in your God whatsoever.
I would love for I'd love for each theist to answer this, though. I think this would be an interesting one.
How about this? Ascertaining the proper God concept. How?
Wait, let's stick with one question at a time. Let's start with Annabelle.
That is the question. Ascertaining the proper God concept.
No.
Oh.
All right. So.
Well, if we could just, if either one of you could just answer, that would be great.
Yeah, Deidre, you want to take this one first?
I feel compelled to believe in God because I'm moved by what I see in the universe and nature and things like that. And that's not really a fantastic argument for the materialist. I understand that, but this is an honest answer.
That's a different answer. But I'm asking how you come to terms with the different beliefs.
I'm getting there. So that would move me to at least a deistic God, right? It would move me to some sort of creator or some sort of source. So what I have done is I have decided, is Christianity consistent? I feel like Christianity is consistent. because one of the big reasons is because of the covenants and how they line up, and how God's promises line up. And I feel like Christianity has consistency and cohesiveness in that way. Is it relevant? Meaning, can I apply my faith in the real world and in a relevant and meaningful way? And yes, I can. And so how do I know this? How do I know this? I've stepped out and taken a leap of faith and belief of this Christian God. I've tasted and I've seen that it's good, and then I apply the faith, and it has had good results. So I've seen lives get transformed personally, and I know this is anecdotal, so it's not the best thing, but I've seen people's lives move from absolute devastation and move into a more healthier place. And so I feel like when faith is applied correctly, and when we do it well, it draws us to a more loving, better selves. So
are you suggesting that people that don't believe in the Christian God don't have the ability to have loving, wonderful lives and get themselves out of messes that they've got themselves into without faith? Are you suggesting that's not possible?
I'm not sure what's possible outside of God, but I will say this, that I've met very moral atheists, I've met very immoral Christians.
So you're not suggesting that what you're saying is it's possible not to do all those things that you've talked about that God has brought you without actually having God in your life.
I can attest from what I've seen in other people's lives, in my life, that faith has been helpful in many ways.
But you also acknowledge that you don't need faith for those things to happen in life, right?
Basically, to simplify the question, can you be good without God?
Yeah, that's pretty much. Well, yeah, I mean, it's not actually the original question, but as you've said that faith has brought you goodness and love and all that, and you know from.
Are we still going?
Annabelle, we lost you.
Okay,
I thought that was me for a second.
I mean, just like humanism.
Bias.
I mean, can no one? Can agree that that's a good thing?
Overall, humanism's a good thing. However, it does sort of negate your the need for God, and I honestly think that what's offensive, I guess, and from a theistic view, is that we believe that God is the creator and source of all morality and everything good, and so we only have the capacity to be good because God has given us that capacity.
All right. Let me ask you a quick question.
Hold on. Before you do, I would like to point out that G-Man has commented 4 times in this hangout. One was that theistic evolution was a lie straight from the pit of hell.
What's up, G-Man?
And then he's questioning us like, these questions are very easy to answer, guys. Act like you know how to answer them.
I'll answer him like G-Man. Atheists are immoral. Reason.
To be fair, Deidre, he did say 58 seconds ago, Deidre, amen, good job.
Come on.
All right.
But then goes to Maximus. Oh yeah, he goes to you, Maximus. Maximus, if you spent more time arguing for God and less time making a fool of yourself on talking fecal matter Tuesdays, you would have had an easy time answering these questions by these atheists. Now they are making you look bad.
What?
Critics, man. Who needs them, right?
Yeah.
You know what? We're not required to answer in the way of G-Man. G-Man can answer for G-Man in the way and the manner that he likes to answer.
Mm-hmm.
And
the Lord works through everyone in their own ways.
You know, I'm not the best apologist. I'm not an apologist, but I know Christian living, and I put.
I have to apologize for not being the best apologist. Now listen, explain to the listeners what bias is in your mind. Yeah. What's bias?
Bias is the inability to look beyond one's own belief and the inability to see outside of one's reality.
The inability to judge something even-handedly. Balanced. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Have you noticed that the believer has a preference to believe in God? that they need to have the God concept in order to believe in it.
Yes, and I think that's ingrained in us. I think that God beckons us. So I have a mystic answer.
You
for that.
think that, then you believe that atheists, I believe in God, except I just deny it. Like, you know, like they say that the atheist really does believe in God, they just deny it. You know, the guy from Mambu Bambu Island in the Pacific who's never heard of Jesus actually does know about Jesus, he just is denying it.
I think God calls and beckons to us in many ways, whether it's through nature, whether it's through philosophy, whether it's through even within other religion. He calls and beckons
Where
us
did
to
you
him in
learn
some
this?
way. It's all over. I learn it
Did
from
you
looking.
not learn it from the dogma of the religion?
No, actually, I'm a little more outside of typical dogma in this. I'm more into mysticism in this. But I would say this, that it seems to ring true to me that God has made himself present in many cultures and many religions and many similarities, beckoning us to him, the one true God. I think
that's
he
fine.
makes himself available, yes.
You know, Allah is God. The Jainism, that's God. You know, the Mormon God, that's God.
I'm not claiming universalism. I'm claiming that God has made himself known and available for those who seek him and care to seek for him.
Okay. There is such a thing as a proper God concept, right?
Yes.
How do you know?
Well, if there's different flavors of God everywhere, right, and there isn't one proper concept, then we'd have a problem. However, what I do understand is that we live in a fallen world and that perhaps our concepts of God might be imperfect or incorrect.
Very good. So you could take your proper concept of God and test it against the false concept of God and, you know, verify that yours is correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you do this easily.
You can
every
do
day.
this by putting faith in action and applying it to everyday life.
The scientists can do this.
A scientist could measure if somebody who was healthy mentally and was putting faith in action, if there was like some sort of benefit, I suppose, any social benefits, any psychological benefits, any
Has
physical
any
benefits.
scientist done that by now?
They did it for
Ascertain
Buddhism.
that Christianity is the proper God concept.
They have not ascertained Christianity is the proper God concept officially, no.
Why not?
Because they're stuck on materialism.
All right. The Christian bends their reality around the God concept. Why the scientist looks at reality even-handedly, you know, balanced, without bias. He's trying to ascertain what is real.
You know, 40% of scientists believe in God.
Yeah, but they don't use God in their practice of science, right?
No, they don't apply the supernatural to the material. They understand that the supernatural and the material are separate. This is what Maximus is going for when he's trying to tell you that he's trying to apply the supernatural and the material as separate things.
But you understand, that's like saying the unreal and the real.
No,
supernatural is unreal. The materialist is real. Things that do exist that science can't test within our reality.
What if I say the supernatural is unseen?
Fine. So are like dark matter, right?
Or
dark
gravity.
Matter is pretty much.
Yeah.
But we can measure its effects, you know, upon galaxies and shit. Why can we not do the same with the supernatural? Why can't we, you know, and then learn to utilize the supernatural, like, you know, to run our toaster off the Holy Spirit, stuff like that.
I would say that
harness ghost power to drive my car.
I would say for the naturalists and the hard materialists, I'd say this, that creation and the universe itself calls to the idea that perhaps there might be a source or a beginning, or at least a deistic God, maybe just for your consideration.
Would you be willing to release your bias in your examination of God?
I don't know if anybody can be not biased, to be honest.
No, that's fine. Can you hear me, guys? Because I'm having huge problems with my computer.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm more than willing to admit that there's a God if I was given the evidence. I'm not. It's not that I'm sat here with my arms crossed. Nope, there's no God. That's not how it is. I don't see any evidence for any of the gods that I've been told exist. And over the years, I've been told all sorts exist. I've been told ghosts exist. I've been told fairies exist. And recently, gnomes exist in the middle of the world. And these people are serious. It's true, though. They're serious, deadly serious.
Mm-hmm.
And not one of them can come up with a shred of evidence. So yes, there's lots of words that they can use to explain their belief, but they can't actually come up with anything, as you say, material. And that, to anybody in the science world, is what's important, is seeing it, experiencing it, testing it over and over again. So to suggest that I don't know, it's very difficult for me and Bunto, I suspect, to even take it seriously when there is nothing that we can see. We just see a lot of people who have been told from birth pretty much. I know that there's exceptions to the rule. I'm very well aware of that. But most people that are very religious, and that is most of the people that we talk to in these groups, are indoctrinated, and that is, I am going to use that word, from birth. And somebody mentioned this in a hangout just earlier on. If any of you were born in
Pakistan
or Saudi Arabia, you would be Muslims. And yes, I know there's a small chance that you might be a Christian, but the chances are that you'd be a Muslim and you'd be believing in, yes, the Abrahamic God, but a different God all the same. If you were born in Japan, you wouldn't be a Christian. The chances are very slim you'd be a Christian.
I was an atheist for 2 years, and I was exploring Buddhism.
I've already said, Max, that there are always exceptions to the rules, but the majority of people who are born in countries where Christianity is the biggest religion, or Islam is the biggest religion, or Jainism is the biggest religion, that's what they are. They don't suddenly have epiphanies and say, oh no, that can't be the right God, I'm going to go and believe in the Christian God.
So which would you say is the best form of government? Just to build an analogy here.
In the game Civilization 3, communism.
Well, in real life, which government would you rather be living under?
A democracy.
Okay, but if you were born in Saudi Arabia, there's a pretty good chance you would have preferred an Islamic caliphate. If you
whoa! What do you mean? That's nonsense. Women don't want an Islamic caliphate. It doesn't make any sense for a woman to want that.
I have actually met women who preferred living in.
Stop giving personal anecdotes. You know how women are treated in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
I know. Okay, so what sociological studies could you cite?
For what? For sociological studies for what?
Well, the point is.
Can you answer my question, please?
Mm-hmm. So to show
sociological studies for what?
So sociological studies that show that women don't want to live under an Islamic caliphate.
If you're going to be that ridiculous, then what's the point?
Muslim women in Saudi Arabia don't want to live under
Islam. That women don't want to be educated and need permission to go outside with a male relative and all the other stuff that I could list for another 10 minutes, then I'm sorry, then you're not being honest.
Well, the point is you don't know what you have if you only lived one kind of life. Many women might be under the assumption that the West...
Women are more than happy because they don't know what's... We know that that's not true. We know we've got women that are trying to educate themselves secretly. We know we have women that are setting up, in Afghanistan, setting up schools so that they can...
Annabelle, there are cases where people are brainwashed. So.
Oh, I understand that, but I'm talking about if they were given a choice, but they're not. But to suggest that they're happy with the situation is just ridiculous. And of course there are women that are happy, but as a whole, women want freedom. Human beings want freedom to choose what they want to do. They're not given that freedom in places like Saudi Arabia. And to suggest that they're happy with that situation is incredibly dishonest.
They might want to live in an Islamic caliphate, but want reform where they can get education. That would still be under the banner of Islamic caliphate.
So a reformed Islamic caliphate.
I mean, where do you see
the whole point I'm just trying to bring up is just like religious beliefs, people are also pushed to accept specific political beliefs. But that doesn't mean that there isn't one political belief which is better than the rest of them. It just means that people have a tendency to prefer one depending on the area of their birth.
The difference is the government is there for a reason. God is there for you. and your needs
Well,
and your wants. You're not helping anybody else by being religious.
Well, for most,
hold on,
that's a very 21st century viewpoint on the matter.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know, but for most of history, religion was seen.
Well, we're not talking about. We're talking about now.
Well, if we're talking about the reason for religion, then we're going to have to reference history here.
All right, Max, we're going to.
I wasn't talking about the reason for religion.
All right, we're going to need to end it here so we can move on to Wolf because he hasn't asked a question. Wolf, do you have a question for any of the theists in here?
I guess
you can go by name, or you can ask us all in general.
Yeah, sure. Like anything in general. Basically, how could one justify for a belief in the supernatural in light of reasonable or inculpable belief? I mean, like as the others mentioned, there is there is an evidently divergent nature with the spread of religions, like over the course of human history, right? From like burying one's dead to like believing in spirits like in animism to polytheism, monotheism, stuff like this, imposing like psychologically the values of that culture and into that belief. Where now, with regard to like the recent progressions of like scientific and philosophical progress, we're seeing like more people like just either not believing or just not conforming to one particular belief system, like Christianity, for example, or other traditional faiths. But how would you reconcile your belief with that, like large amount of non-belief in virgins and stuff?
Welcome, Mark. Max, do you want to, as G-Man says, ramble about this one?
Oh, what am I rambling about? Can G-Man be more specific? I mean, G-Man, it's one thing to
I can tell you what you're rambling about.
I'd like to know what G-Man is accusing me of, though. You're more eloquent than him, so I don't want him to give him any help.
Right.
What?
Why? I just said Annabelle's more eloquent than G-Man.
Whoa.
I don't want to give him I don't want to give him help.
All right, before we get thrown off topic, repeat the question again. Wolf, just so some of them can.
How do you reconcile a belief in the supernatural in light of reasonable or inculpable belief?
Can you give us an example of reasonable or comparable belief?
I just did the recent secularization of society and variety in the variety of nations with regard to religious authority declining in these cultures.
That just shows that people are being less religious. That doesn't show that their decline in religion is reasonable.
Why do you think religion is declining?
Oh.
I think religion is declining. Well, I mean, it's not really a matter of thought, right? I mean, it's right down to sociology and statistics. I mean, what we're seeing not just in like general rises of the non-religious. I mean, we're also seeing like more individuals looking outside of religion for authoritative positions on things that impact their lives. Things like birth control, things like gay marriage, like the impact on the Islamic world and stuff like this. Like actual real academic sources rather than things taken on faith or authority, for example.
Sorry, I just Mark wrote in the side chat.
A reformed caliphate would be a caliphate. It would just have some reforms to it. It's in the very name, caliphate.
That's the whole point of a caliphate. Is it has certain reforming it would not make it a caliphate.
Does anyone know the name of that Muslim? Or she was ex-Muslim. Now she's considered like the female of horsemen of New Atheism. I forget what her name was.
Hershey Ali.
Yeah, her. She made a book that she was like saying that Islam needed a reformation like Christianity got with Catholicism, and then it broke into Protestantism and all that. Being said, that she might consider Islam to be a little more gentle and kind if they actually took the time to consider having a reformation. And I don't know, it just reminded me of that whenever you brought the reformed caliphate and all that up earlier, Maximus.
One thing you could, in her book, she cites a female teacher who was very well swayed with the Iranian, Iran as a new rising power, and with that, she also cited that her teacher was also somebody who educated her. she believed that people deserved an Islamic form of education that included reading and writing, but she also thought there should be some kind of caliph or Islamic head at the head of the state. So yeah, again, those beliefs do not seem to contradict one another.
Sure. But a caliphate would not include women's rights.
Well, a caliphate just means ruled by an Islamic leader.
Yeah, and what? Dear.
No, it's very difficult, Max, because you're not being intellectually honest with this conversation. We all know how difficult it is for women in Islam, and the fact that you're suggesting that women are in some way happy with the situation is interesting to me as a woman who's free to do pretty much what she wants. And if anyone tried to tell me I couldn't leave the house without a male counterpart, it's just the idea.
Well, I mean, that typically.
Well, I mean,
so
there's a
caliphate
culture, right?
The reason I tend to.
But it's a culture based on religion. It's not a culture based on anything else. But what it says
that's the point. Theocracies have actually fallen as a result of this.
I want to acknowledge that. I want to acknowledge that.
So an Islamic caliphate is, by definition, and I'm getting this from Wikipedia, a form of Islamic government.
Yes, we know what it is. Could a woman become a caliph?
The political and religious successor to the prophet.
Islamic government. What's Islam? It's a religion.
It's a theocracy.
Hold on a second.
But wherein that forbids a woman from being educated.
It also prohibits a woman becoming a caliph.
It does, but where's the prohibition of a woman being educated?
Max, listen to your moderator, please.
Hold on a second, because I just now realized I don't think we answered Wolf's question.
Exactly, we've ignored it.
Yeah. So sorry about that, Wolf. Deidre hasn't actually spoken that much or answered. Do you want to tackle this one first?
Can you restate the question, because it's been lost over caliphate arguing?
Yeah, sorry about that, man.
Wolf, could you restate the question?
Yeah. So basically, and like how? Okay. What? How can one justify their belief in the supernatural in light of reasonable or unculpable belief? Basically, individuals looking more outside of religion for authoritative positions, like in science or philosophy or whatever, like with regard to issues that affect their lives.
All right. So my response would be.
So I thought Deirdre was supposed to be responding.
Oh, right.
I'm trying to catch up to what he just asked, because I have trouble understanding you, Wolf, and I'm really sorry for that. I'm not trying to be a jerk.
It's his mic. He's got a bad mic. We all know that.
Yeah. Could you restate it one more time?
Okay. How does one justify their belief in the supernatural in light of reasonable or unculpable belief?
How does one justify the supernatural in light of reasonable and something belief? Again, I think this is another hard materialist question, which I would actually think Christian anarchists should be good at answering, but since I'm so not into the materialist stuff, I'll take a stab and say, again, I look at the call to nature, I look at the universe, and I feel compelled to believe it, at the very least, in a deistic God. And so with that, I'm compelled to believe that there is some sort of source or creator of the universe. And then how do I know that the Abrahamic God, Yahweh, is God? Because I have taken a leap of faith, and I have put faith in action, and I've seen that it works.
Have you studied any other religions? Have you ever looked into Islam or Hinduism or anything like that?
I have a comparative religion book with Islam, Judaism, and Christianity that I've been reading through. And then I just finished a book about Buddhism, and I would say that I'm the weakest on Eastern religion. Eastern religion is extremely foreign to me. Actually, Eastern culture in general, I'm a little bit weak on, and so I've been trying to read up on that.
And do you not find that interesting?
So basically,
sorry.
I just want to ask a quick question. So your answer will be your intuition, like just based on personal experience, right?
Yeah, I mean that's my honest answer. It might not be good enough or more evidential enough for you. I understand that because materialists are really hard for me. Perhaps Christian Anarchist has a better answer for
No,
materialists.
I get that. That's I would. I mean, I mean, it's a typical kind of answer that I grant, you know, because it's faith-based and stuff.
But Christian Anarchist, do you have a more practical, hands-on answer?
No, not at the moment. I would like to actually get to Mark since he's here. I want to try to get as much questions in as possible, especially when new people come in. So, welcome, Mark.
Thank you. I didn't have a specific question. I was just listening. There's that caliphate bit that piqued my.
I gotcha.
As I mentioned earlier, I think there might be Nadia's hangout. This, as Annabelle mentioned about where you're born. That's what determines your religious beliefs. If it was all true, then you know, if you're born in Saudi Arabia or Yemen, you'd be a Muslim. If you're born in Tibet, you're likely to be a Buddhist. If you're born in the UK, you're more likely to be a Christian, but not as much percentage-wise because it's a different type of country. So if you're probably Southern European, you're more likely to be Catholic.
And the point I just want to bring up is that complete.
All right, Max, just hold on. I mean, the whole format is we're trying to go from they ask the question and then, you know, based on whoever gets asked it, we then try to respond to it. So we gotta be patient. Remember
shut up, Max.
Don't
shut up,
okay.
Max.
Don't tell him to shut up. He's doing his best.
It's a joke.
So just to recap the question, if I can understand correctly, and make sure that we're digesting this right, you're asking, how do we know Christianity is correct, since we've noticed that a lot of people's religion is based on region and what part of the world that they have been born in, and
yeah, it is, and what religion your parents are part
Gotcha.
of, if at all. So, if both your parents were atheists and you live in Sweden, chances are a pretty high percentage that you're going to be an atheist. So that's to me is a big indicator, isn't it? It's not about what religion is the truth for one. It's about where you're born.
This strikes me as a genetic fallacy. This is the genetic fallacy is when you attack the reason why someone could come to hold the belief, as opposed to attacking the belief itself as being true.
No,
He's giving a reason. It's not attacking. He's giving a reason.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the reason is based on a fallacious inference. The notion
Well,
that...
no, it's not based on anything fallacious. It's a fact.
Okay, no, well...
You don't get lots of people running... No, you don't get lots of
refers
people running around in Saudi Arabia trying to be Christians, and you don't get lots of people running around in America trying to be Muslims.
Okay, so the genetic fallacy... So when someone is referring to a fact, they're referring to the soundness of a premise, whether or not a premise is true or false. To attack the validity of the premise... Sorry, to attack the validity of the argument is to say that it's malformed. The genetic fallacy is simply fallacy.
Can you stick to English, please?
Try to put it in layman's terms.
Honestly, all this philosophy crap is just pointless.
Fact refers to something which is either true or false, whereas when you attack something based on a fallacy, that means their argument is malformed.
No one's attacking anything, Max. We're not talking.
Yes, you're making an argument against religion.
I'm not.
Yes,
I'm not. No, I'm not making an argument against religion. Neither am I attacking a religion. I'm merely stating a fact, as we know, that the probability that I'm going to be a Muslim if I'm born in Yemen is something like 98%.
All right, but how's this?
Yeah, I mean,
how does it relate to being Christianity true or false?
I'm not saying
Nobody's
it's true or
saying
false.
that.
No,
Max.
he's not,
Nobody's saying that, Max.
Yeah,
No.
For goodness sakes, Max, if you want a philosophical argument, go and find a philosophical debate.
He's asking how can we assert that Yahweh, Abrahamic God, is the right God if God seems to be regional? That's all he's asking.
So yeah, like if God is supposed to be, you know, the God that there's only one God and there's no other God, says the Bible would state, then what about these other deities in other parts of the world? You have.
I'd just like to point one thing out, that Christianity is, there are 2.2 billion Christians in the planet. That means that there are another 5 billion people that do not believe in your God. That's a lot of people. How do you know? That's another big, fact, Max. Fact.
And also,
hence why we got to preach the gospel to so many people.
If you mention the Bible, God, I mean, even in the commandments, God says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." That's clearly, for me anyway, is God saying there are other gods. It's just that you mustn't put them before me. I should be the one at the top.
Or he's talking about...
Otherwise, he would have not mentioned any other gods. There'd be no need to mention them. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. There'd be no need to mention it if there weren't other gods.
There's a story in Jewish mysticism, actually, about Abraham. And then Abraham has a meeting with God and a aha moment with God. And Abraham breaks other idols because he comes from a pagan background and his father is a pagan, and he breaks the other idols and he puts the axe of that he's used to break all the other idols in the hands of one idol, to assert that there is actually one God. So not have any other gods before me, that commandment does not necessarily mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are acknowledging that pagan gods are real, but that we are acknowledging that people worship other gods.
Yes, and where does it say? Where does it say all that?
Lowercase g.
Where does it say all that? In the Bible. That's another way of saying, oh look, it must be true because the Bible says it. That's the case. This story or recounting is mentioned in the Bible, so it's a circular
mysticism, but
but it is circular, isn't it? It's saying, well, the Bible says that there were other gods, but Abraham found out that there weren't any other real gods, and that the God of the Bible is the real one. Well, of course, because that's what the Bible says.
Alright, so I'm going to try to clarify a little more on what Mark's question is, and then we're going to go to Bunto, who says he's got another one. Okay, so I can try to answer it as quick as possible. Mark, read, what is your question? As simple as
it wasn't so much a question. It's just more of a statement that this idea that there is only one true God. Of course, you're going to believe that, but you're going to believe that the only true God is Allah. If, as Dawkins has said probably in several places, you're going to believe that Allah is the only God if you were born in certain countries, and if your parents are also of that certain religion.
Syrian Christians don't exist.
Well, actually, Muslims and Christians both worship the same God.
Max, I am okay.
Okay. Well, let's Scientology then, whatever one you want to pick. If you're born to Scientology parents in America, the chances are you're going to be a Scientologist. If you're born to Mormon parents in certain parts of America, you're going to be a Mormon. That's the point. It's not about which God is true. A lot of it is largely based. Your beliefs are based on where you're born, and what your parents' beliefs are, and then following that, how you're brought up. It may be your parents are atheists, but your grandmother or grandfather has a big influence on your life, and they happen to be Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever.
I mean, to me, I used to be and I can agree with some parts on statistics, but one thing we learned in sociology class is not to rely too much on statistics, since they do tend to change, and I can see maybe not to take that as too much of a big deal, but the reason why I see it is...
With greatest respect, though, Christian Anarchist, the fact is that there are countries where people are the majority religion, and America is a very good example of that.
Right. But, I mean, because I remember talking to this one person, she was like 60 years old, identified as agnostic, and her husband identified as atheist. They had 4 children, and they agreed they wouldn't force. The husband wanted to instill the idea that there is absolutely no God, and that the children would be ridiculous if they came to that conclusion. The agnostic woman didn't want to try to force the views. She wanted the actual free-thinking method, so they could hear about it and they could make the decision themselves.
Sure.
enforce any of it.
That's a point. But if you were born in Yemen, you wouldn't have that opportunity to have the freedom to explore other religions. You wouldn't be allowed to. That's the point. That this freedom that you're talking of only happens in certain countries because of the way that the things are set up.
Well, I want to point out really quick.
Forget about statistics. Look at the actual examples, and there are for every one person you can come up with that you say was brought up in a say a Muslim household but became a Christian or whatever you want to say. There are millions and millions of people that were brought up in a Christian household and have continued that on. So it's all very well to use these tiny minority that are not that way. But, and also we know that, and you talk about social sciences, we know that people they do have a disposition to a belief in something. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? Here's an interesting idea. You know, when communism took over China, and remember when I made that the argument of ad populum to sugar, and I paid for it, right? And you guys said you can't pull in statistics like that, you can't use it. There was a reason why I omitted China to talk about atheism, because China used communism to forward atheism, and I felt like that would be unfair to China. I mean, unfair to atheists to use China as a poster child for atheism. So I used Sweden instead, because I thought that would be a more positive image for atheism. That being said, when people watch China and communism take over, people ask themselves, will religion survive? Could religion survive in China? And you know what the answer is? Christianity is now the most growing religion in China. There was recently a Huffington Post article regarding that.
With the greatest respect, Deirdre, so is Islam.
That my point is that God can move through regions. We are a religion that is based on using evangelism.
Yes.
And
so you're teaching people that this is the real God. I get it, right? But Islam is growing in China as well. So are other religions. It's not just Christianity.
Some people think that China might surpass America as a Christian. Well,
some people can think that as much as they want.
Because and why is that? Because China is opening up and is gradually gaining more freedoms, so the people there are more free, or are getting more freedoms to be able to explore other beliefs, other religions. If you're, as I've put in the sidebar, you're a child in Yemen, you try and see how much opportunity there is to be allowed to explore any other beliefs, any other religions. You simply wouldn't be allowed to, so therefore you'd stay a Muslim. And if you weren't executed or for changing religions, because the penalty for that is death.
There was a time in Egypt where Christianity was king in Egypt. You know that, right? That there was a time in Egypt where Christianity was the religion, not Islam.
Fine, but that doesn't make it true.
Yes, and this doesn't make it. And this discussion of how religion is geographical doesn't make any of these religions false. I don't know.
I didn't say it was. That's the mistake you're making. You're assuming I'm attacking it and saying Christianity can't be true because people are brought up Muslims. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying the whole idea where people get their beliefs from are primarily based on where you're born and what your parents believe.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't trying to.
Well, okay, then there's a good question. This is a question. Why isn't Yemen Christian? Why isn't Vietnam Christian?
No money.
Well, for Yemen, I would say the huge influence of Islamic political control.
So nothing to do with religion, then.
Yeah, it's mostly political control.
Yeah, because
I agree. This is a political discussion.
What?
But I thought, this is a political discussion.
No, it's not.
So what we're trying to say is your belief isn't based on which is the true religion. It's based on birth and geographical location and parents.
My particular belief.
No, to start with.
So,
like I said, if you were born in Yemen, you'd be a Muslim.
Yeah, some people have unjustified beliefs. But aren't you trying to find out whether our beliefs are justified or not?
No.
Or whether they are justifiable?
Your beliefs are your beliefs.
We're talking about religion, not just your belief. I don't believe in any God. I don't believe any God exists, not just yours.
But if I'd been born in Saudi Arabia, I would be a Muslim now. I wouldn't be an atheist.
I think there are lots of atheists in Saudi Arabia. I just don't think they're allowed to be atheists. We know
They're just
that.
not alive.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, all right, so let's try to go to Buntos.
And they did the same thing to Christians did the same thing to atheists for hundreds of years in England. So
Exactly.
Indeed.
And Christians were called atheists for hundreds of years, persecuted in Greece.
well,
Where?
there you go. That just I mean, you're just backing up our argument.
Right.
Instead
so,
of corn oil.
anyways,
Well,
Bunto,
some
Bunto,
saying
do you
golf is
hold
there.
on, Mac. Bunto, do you have a question?
Okay, Yemen. No.
Jeez.
Okay, if G-Man is still out there, this one's for you, baby doll. Okay. Deidre, I'm ready to be converted to
Deidre.
Christianity. Deidre,
Pronto.
Bunto, okay, I'm ready to be converted to Christianity, right? You said you don't like materialism. You can't see any point to it, right? Well, I'm a utilitarian, okay?
We can party with
Okay.
utilitarian.
I want to become a Christianity because when I pray to God, I can get like $1 million, I can get like a boyfriend, I can get a house,
We can talk
right?
about that. Okay.
So
You're up my
that's
alley.
what happens, right? I can just pray to this thing and have things happen.
Okay, so I'm not Joel Osteen, so I'm not gonna tell you name it and claim it. Theology is a good thing, but what I will say this: one of my favorite philosophers, Soren Kierkegaard, says that prayer changes the nature of one who prays and not the will of God. So,
Okay, why do they say that?
so to model Christ, when Christ prays in the Garden of Gethsemane, he said, "Not my will be done, but your will be done." He's modeling how we should pray. He's
Okay.
modeling that we submit ourselves to God's will, and that we want to align ourselves with God's will.
Okay, you claim
God
that
is
there's
not a vending machine.
fine. You claim that there's an outside agency that interacts with our reality, and we call this God. True?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I, as a utilitarian, can pray to this outside agency and have, an effect within my reality. I've got
Yes.
cancer, I pray to this thing, and my cancer goes away. My arm got cut off. I need to regrow a new arm. I pray to the God, and my arm grows back.
So you, as a utilitarian, can say, how do I put faith in action? And you can look up James chapter 2, and it talks about faith without works as being dead. And a lot of people make this mistake that this is about the Catholic and Protestant divide of grace, and how you get saved. But really, what James is trying to say is that if you pray and wish somebody well and walk away, what good is it? So he goes on to say, you need to feed the hungry. You need to give to the needy.
Okay.
You need I
Fair
was
enough.
hungry and you fed me. And same with Matthew chapter
Fair enough.
25. I was
Fair enough.
hungry and you fed me.
Fair enough.
I was in prison and you visited me, right? So
Okay,
there's the utility in faith. The utility
Okay,
in
I
faith
do all these things.
is putting faith
My arm
in
grows
action
back,
in a
right?
practical way.
Okay, I do all these things, and then my arm grows back, right?
Not necessarily. I actually think
Okay.
the apostolic gifts perhaps have passed.
Yeah, me too. I'm a cessationist too.
Okay, why, guys, can I not utilize God?
You can utilize God. If you step out in faith and you seek His will, you can utilize faith. You can apply it in a practical and healthy way.
Why would you seek His will? If it's His will, what's the point in praying for anything to change it?
Very good point.
You want to change the hearts and minds of yourself. You want to change the hearts and minds of other people.
But that would be changing God's plan, would it not?
You want to ask God to intercede for others. Yes.
But that's
God
changing His plan.
intercedes.
No, it's not, because when you ask, because God's plan takes into account your prayer and your account of what
So
changes.
you knew what you were going to pray for, and that's what you're saying. So if he knew, if it was already predestined.
The fact
So
that you were
God-
going to
God
pray.
knew-
Yeah, the fact that you were going to pray was something
So
predestined.
God knew that on the 25th of August, 30th of August 2015 at 4 a.m. I was going to pray that all amputees had their limbs regrown.
Uh-huh.
And God didn't think that was a good idea, so He didn't grant it.
Uh-huh.
Also
It
part of
seems
the
like,
will.
okay, there are things in our universe, Max, that we can measure, right? I mean, like, gravity, electromagnetism, atomic energy, but God is somehow above that, right? I mean, there's some
Right.
sort of use to these things, but God as a force has no use.
God, well, yeah, well, here's the thing. God isn't one thing among many things. He's not something you could just utilize for your own self. That just turns God into some impersonal
enough.
object.
Okay,
I mean,
so God, there's a quality to it, right? I mean, we have to be good in order to have some sort of effect from this force. I mean, it's not like, we have to be good to have a rocket lift off. I mean, we have to good and
well,
plan it,
God,
but if we give it adequate fuel, it can take off the launch pad.
So yeah, God wants us to pray knowing that the answer has already been predetermined.
But also, can I also point out that he doesn't seem to answer that many prayers, really, does he? In fact, I'm stretched to think of one.
And that would also mean we don't have free will then.
no,
I
it
would say
doesn't.
the same thing.
But,
I don't
hang
believe
on.
we do have.
So,
One of the
all right.
most common,
So I
hang
would
on,
no,
one of the most common reasons.
There are four things.
Okay, we'll run through the free will bit quickly. One of the most common reasons.
The ability
given,
to compatibilist free will, not libertarian free will.
One of the most common reasons given for God permitting suffering in the world, say, is that He's given us free will. Correct? So that leads.
I don't go with that one. I don't go with the response.
Okay, that would lead to a contradiction with Him being omniscient.
No, well, again, you're presupposing I'm a libertarian on free will. I'm a compatibilist.
No, I'm not asking about you personally, Max.
Well, yeah, I'm a compatibilist. I think determinism and free will are compatible with one another. They don't contradict.
Right. So if the future is knowable to an all-knowing, the future is knowable to an omniscient being, correct?
Right.
God is omniscient, correct?
Correct.
Therefore, God knows the future.
Correct.
God is never wrong.
Nope.
So He is wrong or not wrong?
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong. So therefore, God foresees you will do action X on day Y, correct?
Right. Correct.
Therefore, you will do action X on day Y.
Correct. And
therefore, you have no choice.
Free will means
compatible.
Compatible.
Free will means having a choice between actions. You can't choose to take a different action than one foreseen by God, as you just agreed. Therefore, you have no free will.
Can we phrase it limited?
I reject your last premise because that's not my definition of free will.
What's free will for you then?
Free will is, to me, a reasonable deliberation.
What? So free will is a choice. I have a choice, don't I? If I have free will, I can choose what to do.
The ability to do otherwise isn't an ingredient. It's not required for free will. That's what I reject. I don't think that is the case. I'm a compatibilist, not a libertarian.
Right. Like the thing that I think he's trying to...
Free will means I can choose to do between actions.
Well, the thing that I think he's trying to get at is that the difference between what he's meaning by free will and then choice is that choice, you're able to make choices, but in his view, those choices are limited based on nature. In the sense of free will, you can choose whatever the heck you want, regardless of nature. Like, we can't fly like birds can. We can't flap our arms like wings. So, because of a genetic thing limited by nature, we can't make that choice, but we are able to make other choices. So I think that's what Max is essentially trying to get at.
Do you believe we have free will?
Not to an extent, no.
So yes or no? Do you believe we have free will?
He said no.
Okay, so no. So we don't have free will in any case, right? Whether or not God exists. If so, I'm not understanding.
I think we can have. It depends. We can have choices,
right.
But those choices are some of them are determined by. Do you want me to finish or not?
Oh, sorry. Okay.
The choices I make are determined by what's in front of me. At the moment, I only have the choice of probably 3 political parties to vote for in the UK, but I still have a choice out of those 3.
All right, so
I can choose whether to eat or well, I don't choose. I have to eat, obviously, as I'll die, but I still have a choice when I open my fridge as to what I'm going to eat. Depends what's in there. But that choice is then limited by what I like and what I don't like.
Okay. So that gives me a good idea. So you could have chosen to come into this hangout or not, right?
Yes.
Okay, then why did you come into this hangout as opposed to not coming into this hangout?
Because I was interested in the discussion topics and I heard a couple of things I wanted to address. So I chose to come into the hangout.
It sounds to me like your desires determined you to come in here.
Well, the desire is different to choice.
Yes, but you said there was some kind of prior reason for coming in here. So that reason determined you to coming in here. So
I've some hangouts I've been interested in the subject and chose not to come in and get involved. Or I chose to come in but have been prevented because the hangout's full. I mean, how deep down the rabbit hole do you want to go?
Yeah, where are we going?
The point is, you could cite some prior reason for coming in, and I could cite that. Well, that's the reason that determined you. And if you say that's not sufficient enough, I could just put it back one step and back one step, and you just get into an infinite regress. This is why I think
I could have chosen. I thought, well, I want to go in that hangout. Oh, I can't. It's full.
Okay.
So
can we? I mean, you're not getting anywhere.
Hold on. Yeah, let's move on.
Okay, look. Okay. Can I
have a question.
To dovetail my question?
Bunto, hold on. Annabelle's got a question. We are going to respect the women.
Okay, so my question was answered. I wanted to dovetail.
Not really. I know, Bunto, but that's the problem. Max just goes off on another tangent entirely.
Well, it was to Deidre. That's the one I asked. I mean,
yeah, but Deidre.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Bunto. What's up?
Okay, look. The utilitarian wants to use the supernatural and God. They can't, right? Because there's, that's not the whole point of the God thing, to use God.
Do me a favor and define utilitarian for your use, please.
For my things, like anything that has meaning within my reality has to have some sort of use. The things that I see and experience within my life, that has some sort of function, use, that I can derive from it.
So restate your question again for me. I'm sorry.
Okay, what I'm trying to say is like, okay, I'm ready to become a Christian, right? So, I want to pray to God so I can, God helps me make it through the night, right? I mean, why isn't it that simple for the utilitarian? I mean, why do people pray if it's not within God's will? That's Mark's point.
Because if things happened outside of God's will, and that are, I believe that we have freedom, but it's limited.
We actually have the power to go outside of God's will.
Yes and no, because Romans states that God can turn all things into His purpose. So, yes and no. We can't fully thwart God's will. You can resist God's grace, but you can't thwart His will.
Okay, I'll just leave it at that. It's like we're not sure how to utilize God.
All right, so let's go to Annabelle and her question. She wants to discuss the growth of secularism or non-belief and the positive impact on society. Well, you want to elaborate more on,
Yeah. I'm just going to, and Max, I'd appreciate it if we could just stick to, facts and not your personal anecdotes. Thanks. Okay, so we look at the countries that are secularist and in particular those that are majority non-belief. And bar one or two, which would be North Korea and possibly Vietnam, they are successful. They're up on the highest of when they do the. I'm sorry, I'm really tired. When they do these sort of, it's not a survey, it's a UN thing, not a UN thing. When they do the happiest countries and the people that have got the most quality of life, and they're safe, people are safe, women are safe, women have all those things. When they do these sort of comparisons,
survey.
It's not a survey. It's these things that the governments do, and they do global impact. I suppose surveys where they see how people's quality of life is, how women's quality of life is, children's quality of life is, and they add it all up and come up with the happiest, most successful countries. Most of them in these top 10 are secularist, and the most religious countries are the most poverty-stricken and dangerous. So that goes really against everything that's religious, in my opinion. That loving, caring, warm, fuzzy religion. It isn't quite like that in reality at all. In fact, religion creates an awful lot of divisiveness, between not just between different tribes and different religious sects, but also between families. It's created a huge rift in my family, and I just wonder how that makes. I mean, do you ever look at that and think, okay, that's interesting, or do you just ignore it and just carry on?
I do find it interesting because I still think this doesn't shape my view on the concept of rather the God concept is wrong, or the concept of the morality I give in Christianity, because I believe that human beings are moral creatures just by nature.
Mm-hmm.
This, from my view, that we're made in the image of God, which doesn't mean God looks like any of us, because if so, that's a lot of confusion, since looking at the Hangouts now, we all look very different. But it just means that we're moral people, and there are secular people that are moral, and even the apologist Matt Slick admits this. His only problem is that he thinks that atheists, with their worldview, can't justify their sense of morality, and I would disagree. I think they can, because, atheism is something that's their view, and then they've managed to come up with arguments, they managed to come up with the way of thinking, they managed to come up with a bunch of things, so they have a way to justify it because they had it worked out within a system like every other religion or philosophy or other thought has. They have some form of system for how they view things, how they carry out the arguments, so there is a sense of a system, and I that's the part I think that's very interesting, that we're able to be moral, we're able to build societies. This can be done without someone believing in God. And of course, Bunto says morality is for a-holes.
Morality is given to us.
I wasn't talking about. I really didn't want to go down the morality.
I know. I got distracted.
Okay. Hold on. Let's go. Hold on.
I don't want to go down the morality rabbit hole. I really don't. I mean, it's a ridiculous argument, in my opinion, that I'm not a moral person because I don't have God in my life.
I think you're a very moral person, and I think I know. I'll tell you why. This will probably tick off some of the Christians. I think you're very moral because you're a woman. You're the most moral person out there. I mean, you seem to
piss off a lot of males.
They're smart. They're smarter than men. They seem to know how to take care of us a little bit whenever.
Oh, come on!
I think Annabelle's a moral person because she acts nicely, not because I
think Annabelle's moral because she has a vagina.
Because I
opposed to that.
That's not true at all.
I was going to say because she acts nicely, she's honest and open with other people, she's good for a laugh, and she tries to.
Annabelle can be naughty.
It's got nothing to do with morality.
My main point is it's not because you have a vagina. My main point is it's not because you have a vagina. It's because you have positive qualities.
I regret this.
Yes, you should.
Can I respond now? Can I respond, please?
Yes, respond. I apologize.
My gender's got nothing to do with morality. We all know that.
Right.
Women can be just as vile and badly behaved as men, and men can be just as vile and badly behaved as women. Okay?
So I just hope you know I was making a joke there.
Okay, fair enough. And as far as Max, I'm gobsmacked, Max, that you would even consider calling me nice, considering you have to listen to me in private hangouts. So that's yeah,
Max and I like getting punched in the nose. You say, "Let's be honest," and we go, "Oh, here we go."
But I have, my morality comes from learning the hard way, basically. I wasn't brought up in a particularly functional family, and things didn't go right from the word go, really. And I had to learn the hard way, and I've come out of it the other end, and all without God. So this idea that I'm borrowing, I mean, we hear this all the time from the fundies, that I'm borrowing from their worldview or their whatever it is they say. Right. To me, it's just ridiculous. I've never had God in my life, so how can I possibly have borrowed or used God to become... I know the threat of God, the threat of hell, the threat of, if I don't do this, this man in the sky is going to shoot me down or send me off when I die to some awful place. No, it was because something in me kept, the voice in my head kept telling me that I was doing wrong things, but I kept doing them. I definitely did. I kept drinking, I kept taking drugs, I kept treating people like shit. And then as gradually as my life became difficult, not always, I had some good times, but there were I learned the hard way. That's my morality, and that's why I find it very difficult to deal and listen to people telling me that without God I wouldn't be the moral person that I am.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that wasn't really my point. My point was,
You love it.
It basically is amazing to me that you guys don't see what's going on in the world right now, where secularism is growing, where non-belief is growing. People are happier, they're more productive, they have better lives. Where religion is powerful and rules the country that it's in, people are poverty-stricken. They're scared. I mean, the most dangerous cities in the world are in Central America. It just also happens to be some of the most religious Christian areas also in the world. Doesn't that tell you something?
It tells me that religion and government should always be separate, and religion gets corrupted when it becomes political. So,
I'm sorry, but in Central America, the government, it's not like Saudi Arabia. They don't use God to bully their citizens. It's just a very strong Catholic. Catholicism is very powerful in these countries. The church is more powerful than the government.
How was religion corrupted by politics that led to people shooting girls in the face because they want an education?
How is, out of curiosity, how does the atheism or the secularism of these nations have a direct correlation with their happiness? Because
we're not going to answer questions with questions.
I didn't say it did. I said, look at these countries that are non-religious,
right?
that have these very high numbers of non-believers or are very secular, and then look at the religious countries and see the difference in the quality of life. That's all I'm saying.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So, and I don't know, did I answer that earlier to your satisfaction, or do you want me to?
No, because you said something very stupid.
Okay.
How about this?
Anyway, look, I'm just, to be honest with that, I was more making an observation and pointing it out to you guys. I wasn't trying to, this disproves God, because of course it doesn't. And in fact, I'm very aware, and one thing, I'm going to shut up after this, got to sound like DPR. I'm very aware that religion is very important to most people on the planet. You know, we are the minority by far at the moment, and spiritualism is, and being in touch with something other than yourself, you know, whether that be nature, whether that be God, whether that be fairies, whether that be, I don't know, it's important to humans. They need it, and I get that. So that's not, I don't have a problem with that. Where I have a problem is where you have one particular religion telling us that that's the real religion, this is the real God, and this is how you should behave based on a book that was written 2,000 years ago by people that were, had no concept of science, no concept of people's behavior and how it affects people, how beating your wife and beating your children would affect you. None whatsoever. The rules were set in place specifically for men in mind, and so I've got no time for that at all. I'm sorry. And I'll shut up now, and somebody else can ask.
I would say that you do have a point when you talk about secularism and doing good in society, in the sense that I find that secular humanists do have a little bit of a dig on us when I say when we do something kind, it is really altruistic, because there is no gold star from God and there is no reward of heaven. And I'll acknowledge that, and I'll tip my hand to you guys and say, those of you that do good for the sake of
point out everybody that I donated $500 tonight. I'd just like to point that out. Have any of you done that?
There's no gold star, like in your mind or a promise of heaven, and so that is you being generous because you want to be generous.
Actually, no, that was me. No, that was me proving a point to Shamos. Actually,
okay.
Anyway.
Either way, it might help someone else, right? But
exactly.
here's the thing. There's a point I was going to.
I'm going to shut up now. I promise.
All right.
That secularism, while it's growing in some ways, so are faith-based you know, and it's more like I'm seeing shifts. I'm seeing shifts
Well, no,
all
you
around.
can't deny that Christianity is losing followers in droves.
You can't deny Islam's growing. So what?
Yeah, well, no, I admit Islam's growing, absolutely.
Right. I mean, yeah. All right. So I want to try to.
The
We've
West
only
is
got.
becoming less and less tolerant of the Abrahamic religions. The West is saying, no, we're not going to be told that there's something wrong with homosexuality, because there's not. Science has shown us that there's not. And so you and your book can go and do whatever you need to do in your own homes, but don't tell us how to
And I
behave.
could understand the issue if Islam was growing in Sweden or Denmark, but it's not. Like Islam is growing in Islamic countries.
In France.
No, it's not. It's not growing in France.
It's being imported.
Actually, that's not true. Islam is growing in these regions.
Mainly because they've got a large
No,
import
there's
of...
a big difference between migration and people going and looking for that religion. Yes, we've got migrants coming into these countries who are Muslim, but that doesn't mean it's growing.
They're also having more kids than the native populations.
What's that got to do with
Well,
anything?
how do you know the kid?
I'm pointing out that you're going to see some secular countries shift to more religious. You're going to see some religious countries shift to secular. It's going to happen.
And,
All right, hold on.
And it matters because if you look at secular people, they're far less likely to have kids.
All right, hold on a second.
Right. So that means then, because there are more Muslim children being born in the country, that means what? Other than there are a lot more children, doesn't mean Islam is just because that's an appeal to statistics.
All right, hold on. We only have time for one more question, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Or whatever it's called.
But
Ad populum, but no, it's not.
Yeah.
But we're gonna keep a off-air hangout for anyone that just wants to chill and relax. But in order for the show, we're gonna need to wrap it up with one more question, and we got Sugar Rhodes, who we would like to.
Sorry.
What's up?
Come on, honey.
I don't have a question. I was just listening.
God dang it!
Just listening and learning. Sorry.
All right, fine. Who wants to finish this off with the last question?
Let me see. What question could I have that's fair? Alrighty. Isn't Christianity better than Islam? Because I don't know which one I'm going to go. Islam or Christian.
Who are you asking for this one for?
Just all our theists here. Which is better, Christianity or Islam?
I personally would think that Christianity is better based on doctrines.
Women. I want to get more women.
Yeah,
I would love to answer that too.
Yeah,
I can marry more women if I'm in Islam, right?
yeah, but then you gotta cover their faces. You got numbers in their eyes.
I remember
Which is the more advantageous religion, even-handedly, Muslim or Christianity?
Then you have to cover their faces outside. You can have them naked as you want indoors.
True. Okay. But what were you saying earlier, Bunto?
What is the more advantageous religion, Christianity or Islam?
I would say Christianity, because you would not be forced or required to follow a theocracy, much like Islam would for its things that they're trying. Now they're building up activists to promote a theocracy in whatever region, such as England with that one Muslim, Shudri, that's trying to advance Sharia.
You have more Muslims in America per capita than we have in. I mean, your percentage of Muslims is higher in America than it is in the UK.
And that's interesting because why do you think it is that things like Christianity as opposed to Islam have reformed and evolved to a certain extent? Because people were no longer put up with. Well, no, just leading on from what Christian said, is that because you're not so Christianity is not so rigid and it's not so. People aren't killed anymore and there's a reason for that, because people will...
The Enlightenment?
No, because because the same as they're allowing women to be priests, etc. Because people are saying, well, I don't want to be part of this religion if we can't have these freedoms and we can't have these reforms. That's why.
I propose that we are allowed, under God's grace, to evolve somewhat socially, and that we have seen it in the Old Testament. We saw them move from a nomadic tribe to establishing a tribe within a region, to trying to establish a city like Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And so we see a social.
And that was all based on war and death.
Yes,
isn't-
the Bronze Age.
Yeah.
Hey, please let me finish really quick. So you
okay.
see in the Old Testament throughout the Bible that actually man is socially evolving, if I can use that word, and actually growing
Yes,
in some
please.
degree. But here's the thing: your first question was why Christianity instead of Islam? Well, Islam asks you to follow 5 pillars, right? Testimony, prayer, fasting, almsgiving, and pilgrimage, right? And
Sure.
if you follow all of these to your best
Not
of your
quite.
ability, if you follow these things to your best of ability, perhaps maybe
As a man-
Allah will show you grace, and perhaps maybe Allah will.
Yeah, but sorry, Deirdre,
love you.
Perhaps.
Christianity.
No, hang on, Deirdre, you're running off
Christianity
on
has
this.
a God. Christianity has God in flesh coming down, saying to man, "I offer you a gift of grace for
Oh, what?
free."
What?
For free. All you have to do is confess in your heart and believe in your.
Deirdre, stop preaching.
Let her finish.
He's
all you have to
proselytizing.
All you have to do is confess with your mouth and
Hey,
believe in your
listen,
heart
you're
that
just
Jesus is
getting
Lord, and you'll be saved.
now.
But Islam says do these works. You see the
Well,
difference?
No, wrong. I have to stop you there because you're saying that's what Christianity is about now. It wasn't then. It was as bad as Islam is now. Back then, people were being killed for not.
I'm talking about the actual doctrine of Christianity.
That's not the actual doctrine, though, and the same as Islam is now. The 5 pillars bit isn't just about that. If you're a woman in Islam, you don't get any choice. You do as you're bloody well told. Or if you don't do the same things that men want you to, you're taken out in the desert, stuck in a little pit, and stoned to death, and then shot in the back of the head. So don't tell me it's equal for all. It's not. The same as Christianity is not equal for all, because some Christians have their wives chained to a sink all day long and are told what to do.
And some Christians are children to gay.
I would say that's applying faith badly. That is not applying faith.
Oh, so
the
Bible says submit.
It is not applying faith in the way that Jesus models.
So you're
called
telling me
Christians.
you want
submit to one another.
Christian means to be Christ-like.
Deirdre, stop talking and let other people speak, because you just keep preaching. You're telling me that my sister-in-law in Mississippi, who has been dedicated to God her entire life, goes to church every day, yet truly believes what's said in the Bible about homosexuality, so is now sending my nephew to gay conversion therapy.
Oh my God.
So how do you explain that? Because she clearly believes that is what God wants. She doesn't want him to go to hell.
I would say that her religion is fear-based, and that is not what Jesus.
But it says in the Bible. That's what it tells her in the Bible.
Well, can I say one thing on Deirdre's behalf?
Take her to gay conversion therapy.
Pardon? I didn't hear what you said, Max. What did you say?
I don't believe the Bible anywhere instructs anyone.
Well, obviously not,
to
Max,
send
but
their
it says
kids
that
to gay conversion
the
therapy.
killer.
abomination.
She should be killed. That's the theory. He should be killed. Okay. There's
Unbelievable,
one thing
Max.
I like to say.
Under
I said that because of her beliefs in the Bible, she thinks that and her pastor, they have decided that he needs gay conversion therapy. Now, I've told lots of people this lots of times. This is nothing new. I've not come up with this out of the blue.
All right.
Right. One thing I'd like to say on Deirdre's part is she did bring up something very interesting. She said evolution, if she may use evolution. Yes.
Social
Does
evolution.
not religion prove that evolution is true? Because, listen, I asked you guys which would be more advantageous, Christianity or Islam, and you said Christianity, right? Because you're all Christians. But if I was in Pakistan asking the same question, the answer is Islam. Because Islam has adapted to that culture, right?
And if you were a Christian in Africa, you'd be treated, and the thing changes again. A Christian in Africa and a Muslim in Africa are different to a Muslim in Saudi Arabia or a Christian in America. Because
and you'd probably say,
in Africa, Christians murder gay people.
and if I was to ask you guys which is more advantageous, being an atheist or being a Christian, I'm pretty sure you'd all say being an atheist.
Yes. So evolution is true.
What I was trying to point out, instead of preaching, I don't.
What does that show?
I've been both, Max, so I've tried both.
It shows you the plasticity of the religious concept, Max.
What I was trying to show you earlier was that there is uncertainty in Islam that isn't necessarily in Christianity. That there is you must earn God's favor, which is not necessarily in Christianity. That's what I was trying to show.
No, there isn't uncertainty in Islam at all.
Are you kidding
Well, the
me?
thing is like this.
Deidre? They're
I'll
far
give
more
Deidre your
dedicated
part.
than Christians.
They still don't know where they'll stand. Go ask somebody from Islam. Go talk to Farhan.
I
Go
have.
talk to him.
Deidre, you're certain that Christianity is correct, right? Christianity is correct. I'm certain of it, right, Deidre?
I've stepped out in faith, and so far I've liked what I've seen.
Have you been a
So
Muslim?
The Muslim guy, he's certain that his is right.
I can't believe it, Deirdre. I can't believe both you and Max are being very intellectually dishonest in this discussion.
What?
Yeah,
I use the Bible. I mean, I can't help it.
Yes, you're.
I'm not throwing the genetic fallacy around, and now you're saying that Muslims aren't as dedicated as Christians.
I didn't say dedicated. I said they are more uncertain about where they're going than we are.
If they're not
more certain.
If they're uncertain, they're not dedicated, are they?
They could be fully dedicated.
But doesn't certainty imply something that's testably true that we can verify within our reality?
I think if there was any charitable interpretation of what was being said, she's speaking in terms of how one is saved in Islam as opposed to Christianity.
Yes.
In Islam, you work, you follow a set of laws, and that's what gets you saved.
Not if you're a woman, you don't.
Christianity.
Not if you're a woman.
Hey,
hold on a second.
Stop interrupting.
Alright, calm down, everybody.
In Christianity, one is saved through God's grace. God saves you.
It depends on what type of Christian you are. Different denominations have different rules, have different certainties. In Islam, you don't get a choice if you're a woman.
Then please address.
Hold on. We're gonna need to cut it off here. We've run out of time. This definitely escalated very.
Max, you're in the wrong hangout, sweetheart. You should be in a philosophical argument where you can use all these big words that you throw around. You and I have had many conversations in private hangouts, but your behaviour tonight has been pretty appalling, in my opinion.
Look, if there's a word you don't understand, please just ask me what does that word mean, and I'll be happy to clarify it.
And you just come up with another spiel about your philosophical spiel. We're not in a philosophical debate here.
Alright, so...
And if this is... just a tip, Max, if you're going to make money out of this game, then I suggest that you calm down and stop getting upset when other people have different opinions to you.
Well, the thing is we theists here have different techniques of how to handle things, right? So I'm not as...
He's huffing and puffing and throwing his head around and getting really annoyed because he wants to have a philosophical debate. He wants to use... I mean, he's...
I'm annoyed because
we're not. That's not what the atheists that you invited into this room. That's not what we're about. That's very clear and was made very clear to him at the beginning.
Christians trying to get some control back. To be fair,
I was.
He wants to end the show.
I was upset because of the double standard.
Maximus. Alright. So that's all the time we have for Apologia versus Atheism, or as the English, Apologetics versus Atheism. So, yeah,
hope you enjoyed the show.
Yeah, this seemed to be.
What's Bunto doing in here then?
Satanist.
This seemed to be. You're a Satanist?
Yeah, just more
cool.
utility and Kiss and Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, backwards.
Interesting. Well, I mean, this.
Listen, we want to say a big hello to that #1 pussy who's returned. G-Man, thanks for coming back, pussy.
Alright, I wouldn't call him that, but I mean, he was talking a lot of trash to even other Christians on here, and I just found that to be absolutely ridiculous. So, but yes, I would like to thank my theist guests for showing up. Max, I would like to just recommend and advise next time to have patience and at least take a chill pill whenever you do get frustrated, because I know how you feel.
I will find you and I will kill you.
Watch some G-Man hangouts and learn how to control your emotions.
That's how I learned to have patience.
I'm kidding.
That's how I learned to have patience, by watching those G-Man hangouts. I got on there and I'm like, okay, I just gotta tolerate this, and I will be good to go. But and I would also like to thank all the atheists, Annabelle, Mark, Bunto, Sugar, or anyone that's just, that wanted to even participate, that watched. I would like to thank all y'all for watching, participating. This was definitely a good hangout. I just thank all of y'all. So until then, Shalom Aleichem.